It's over a year now since Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza and beyond began. And of course, that genocide has been directly facilitated by Western governments, including the British government. Now, 8% of arms sales to Israel were suspended, 8%, 92% weren't. The British government essentially apologised, bent over backwards, apologising for doing that in the first place. Also, crucial components, for example, to F-35 jets, which rain death and destruction in Gaza, continue to be given to the Israeli state for those purposes. Now, how will history judge those who took certain actions during this period? How will they judge British government ministers who continue to facilitate genocide and, as things stand, have huge salaries, are chauffeured around? And how will it judge those who tried to do something to stop a genocide, which is what we're talking about here? And those people, as things stand, are not being chauffeured around. They're not on huge extortionate salaries. They're being arrested and languishing behind bars. Now, 10 members of Palestine Action, who take direct action in the long history in this country of peaceful civil disobedience against injustice, against a weapons company based in Bristol. And they now face a lengthy detention and then a trial, and they are having counter-terrorism legislation used against them. And it was always clear with this legislation how it was going to be used. And when it was passed at the time, these different forms of legislation, people made it clear it would be ended up being used against protesters, and we can see that happening. While state terrorism on an industrial scale is facilitated by these weapons. The world, as ever, turned upside down. Now, I'm particularly delighted to be joined by the two of the mothers of those who've been arrested, Sakina and Claire. Sakina's daughter, Fatima, turned 20 just the day before she was arrested on August the 5th. And Claire's daughter, Zoe, turned 21 in prison 2 weeks ago. It's great to speak to you both. I'm so sorry. Obviously, this is a very traumatic time. You must be very proud, on the one hand, of what your children have done, but it's a huge sacrifice that they are paying. Sacrifices paid by similar people throughout history, and we know how history judges the people who took those sacrifices, but in the here and now, that doesn't make it any easier. Firstly, just what's it been like these last few weeks? It's been 2 months now.
So Fatima Zainab has always been very passionate about social justice. She even before the war in Gaza started, she's been advocating for injustices around the world, whether it's Sudan, Congo, Kashmir, just to name a few. She always says that, if you ever wonder what you would have done during the slave trade or apartheid South Africa or the Holocaust, then that's exactly what you're doing right now in the present day during a live stream genocide. And for Fatima Zainab, when the genocide began a year ago, she attended protests and marches. She went to teach-ins, fundraisers, and she also was part of the encampment at her uni. At home, we boycotted religiously. We prayed and we cried together. And then, 10 months into the genocide, the situation kept on worsening in Gaza. The open murder of 6-year-old Hind Rajab and the murder of the innocent babies kept Fatima Zainab awake at night, feeling really distressed and helpless. And I believe that this is when Fatima Zainab decided to take direct action, putting her freedom and her future online for what she believes in. And it's important to also note here that Fatima Zainab, she strongly believes that no one is free until all of us are free. And that's one of, that's her favorite line that she always keeps on telling us. So they broke into Filton in Bristol. That's the Bristol-based research hub that was opened last year. It's Elbit Systems is one of Israel's largest weapons manufacturer, and they allegedly caused damage to over £1 million worth of weapons in the factory.
Claire, do you want to tell me about about Zoe as well, and then we'll talk about the action that was taken?
Yeah, very similar to what I'm hearing about Fatima. Zoe she attended march after march after march, and she got her friends to come along. She's also, like, social justice is just part of her DNA. It's a huge part of who she is. She early on she bought a gigantic white bed sheet, and she decided she was going to write all the names of the then only 2,000 children who'd been killed and their ages, and she was going to take it to the next march. And she didn't write a single name on that sheet. She felt so defeated and overwhelmed, and she just went back to bed for the weekends. And I think it was after that that she kind of came across Palestine Action and realised that direct action really is the only way to go. And she said that to me without telling me what she was going to do. And so then the first I heard was 6th of August, when 4 police officers came and knocked on my door with a warrant to search her bedroom and said that she'd been arrested in Bristol.
Now, so can you just tell me what exactly they were arrested initially under normal criminal charges, but then the next day that was counter-terrorism charges. Tell us about that.
So they were arrested on the 6th of August under criminal charges. And then we were really surprised to hear on the 7th of August, they were rearrested under counterterrorism charges under the Terrorism Act and brought to London to Hammersmith Police Station as well as Newbury Police Station. They were held in communicado and in solitary confinement for up to a week without any charges. And then when they were finally charged, it was not to do with the Terrorism Act. All terrorism charges were dropped. And it's been really distressing how the government is using these draconian counter-terror laws to incarcerate the Filton 10, as they're now known.
And what's really been chilling is that although they didn't charge them with terrorism, they charged them with things like criminal damage, as you'd expect. On the charge sheet from the Crown Prosecution Service, it says with terrorist connection, and that has been plaguing them ever since. So every judge that's considered bail has obviously been freaked out by terrorist connection and has refused it. It's also the investigation still being led by counter-terrorist police, and I had, after that initial search by 4 officers, I had 12 counter-terrorism police turn up in a massive van and search my entire home from top to bottom. So it's the counter-terrorism thing it extends to everything. So they refuse bail, we think, because of that. In prison, they're given just very severe restrictions that don't apply to any of the other prisoners. So that the 6 women of the 10 who are in Bronzefield have a non-association order on them, which means that they're restricted in their everyday activities. They can't apply to do something that another of the 6 might be doing. And that's affected visits, it's affected accommodation. My daughter was kept in the induction wing where she was unable to make friends for the first 2 months. So it will mean as well that when they're sentenced, they will get longer sentences because of the terrorism connection.
And just to add on to what Claire just said, with the visits as well, because of the non-association order on all of them, if one of them books the visit, none of them is able to book a visit, whereas on remand, they're allowed to have a visit every day at Bronzefield. But because of this, their visits are severely restricted as well.
So we're talking about a trial next year, and they're under detention all that time.
I mean, we can apply for bail again, but our experience so far has been that judges have just not been interested. Despite they don't, they meet the conditions for bail, especially R2. They've never committed another offence. They've got absolutely no incentive to abscond. We were putting up a huge amount in security for them. And yet there's just this no, they stay in prison.
Now, I'm just going to read from Open Democracy, which actually did a long piece about another case involving including Israeli nationals who took previous action against Elbit. Just again, for more clarity, the court was told then that Elbit's UK Israeli parent company, Elbit System Limited, supplies 85% of land-based equipment used by the Israeli military, with the firm marketing its drones as the backbone of the Israeli Defence Force. The case also saw a senior Elbit executive give evidence at UK court for the same time. Now, they say that the company shipped products to its parent company Israel for support and repairs, but insisted they didn't supply the Israeli military. However, they I mean, they said this is a UK listed company, therefore operates within the bounds of UK law. But under cross-examination, Wright, from a director, said there was a very significant overlap, or accepted there's a very significant overlap between senior staff at Elbit UK and its Israeli parent company in certain areas. He also accepted there was a very large overlap in the product portfolios of the two companies. 2 of the 3 executive editors of Elbit UK are also directors of Elbit Systems Limited, and they also accepted that Elbit UK's profits flow back to the parent company in Israel, which has ultimate control over the UK company. So it's just important to make that point, because they are making the claims of Elbit UK is, look, we're not actually arming here the Israeli military, but there's no, that distinction between them and their parent company in court has already been clearly very thoroughly challenged.
Yeah. I mean,
and we know
for me, that I had never heard of Elbit Systems until Zoe dragged me into this, kicking and screaming, and I'm just sickened isn't a strong enough word for the fact that our country is hosting Israel's biggest arms manufacturer, and even giving them contracts to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of pounds since they've been based here. I just, you know, if people knew that, what would they do? You know, people need to know that these deadly weapons, these drones, which are just diabolical, are being made here, and they are being sent to Gaza. I mean, it was very clear that the quadcopter drones that the 10 found in Filton were the same that are used in Gaza. It's diabolical, and people need to know, and they need to raise their voices about that.
And just on the quadcopters used by, I mean, know this from the parent company, certainly Elbit, the parent company, Israeli parent company. Those quadcopters today, I interviewed a doctor who'd been at Nasser Hospital, who testified that the quadcopters were used, that 60% to 70% of the victims that he treated in Nasser Hospital were women and children, that you could tell from the cuboid pellets. They're not like bullets. They ricocheted around the victims. Often when a bomb lands, then the drones, the quadcopters appear. They then shoot at those who have survived, including in the back as they run away, and in the chest. And this includes small children, I should note as well. And these are quadcopters we know. Again, we know what do people say in terms of the parent company, the Israeli parent company. And in court, we can see you can't distinguish, but this is not an autonomous company. And that is a really key point. Now, legal authorities, lawyers across the world, you know, there's a consensus of grievous war crimes and crimes against humanity being committed by Israel in Gaza and beyond. We also have the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor issuing requests for arrest warrants against the Israeli Prime Minister, his defense minister. How do you feel about the fact that of all the people who are currently behind bars, it's not those who are slaughtering children, for example, imposing a deliberate siege on Gaza with starvation as a consequence, you know, the mass destruction of civilian infrastructure, including the entire hospital system? They're not behind bars. They're actually still running the show. It's your kids, your children. They're behind bars. How do you feel about that? Sakina first.
Just at this point in time, I just feel that international law, UN, it just all seems like a farce. All these organizations and laws and resolutions and human rights organizations, they're not able to protect us starving people from being bombed and burned alive. They're the real the real terrorists are roaming around free, whereas people of conscience, young people who care, who are standing up for justice, are the ones that are being incarcerated and being unjustly given unjust treatment by the government. So that is upon us ordinary people to raise awareness and to raise that conscience and the voice, and to be able to stand up for justice for all of them.
Claire, how do you feel about that?
It's unbelievable. It's just so difficult to get your head around, and it's particularly the terrorism connection, the use of counter-terrorism powers, which when we first learned of, because we weren't getting our phone calls from our loved ones, 3, 4, 5 days went past, and we realised this is counter-terror powers being used against them. And everyone at Palestine Action and all the families were all the lawyers were saying, we've never heard of this before. This is completely unprecedented. But I think in a way, maybe because they have taken this step that's gone so far, that people will wake up and realise, just how unacceptable and upside down this is. We would say that our children are upholding international law. They are doing what the government should be doing by stopping the arms, the flow of arms. So we've got a petition out at the moment which has reached 4,000 signatures. It might be by 5 by now. It's growing very quickly. We'd really urge everyone to sign that, to say stop using counter-terrorism powers against these activists.
And I'll be including the link, just so everyone knows, is in the description of the video and tweeted out and all the rest of it. So make sure you do that. Just another question I guess is, some will say, this is a deterrent. Basically, your kids, what they're going through, your children, this will stop other people from wanting to take action. It's just, what do you say to that? People look at this and go, this is, if you cross a line when it comes to trying to stop this genocide, then you'll end up behind bars for an indefinite period. What do you say in terms of that chilling effect?
We have heard, we've heard from many sources that our children are being made an example of by the government. And I just have one question in return. Why are the British government so keen on protecting and hiding what's happening in the world at the expense and at the cost of its own citizens?
Yeah, exactly right. Why? The way I see it is that Elbit, having grasped what Elbit is, I see it as this huge monster with tentacles, and it's sort of bloated on the blood of innocent people. And I see our children going in with sticks and poking it because no one else will do that. No one else is brave enough. And it feels like the government has just come down to protect Elbit Systems, to protect the arms manufacturers. It's just what is that about? Whose side should they be on? But in terms of whether it's going to deter other people, I think the opposite is true. I think people are so inspired by the bravery of our children, and they've set an example of not sitting on your hands, because our young people have been watching a genocide unfold on social media, and many of them are devastated at the powerlessness that they feel. And something like Palestine Action is giving them a vehicle to express their grief and their anger and their solidarity. And I think more and more people will take that route, and they'll say, yes, I'll be arrested. If it means one more child isn't killed, yes, I'll put myself up for arrest. Yes, I will sacrifice my university education, which is what our daughters are doing right now. Yes, I'll sacrifice my liberty. And I know lots of people are making that decision, inspired by our kids.
Can I ask,
and on the ground also.
Okay.
Sorry. So just, we've also seen so many different movements sprung up in the past year. We've seen all these solidarity movements within universities, campuses that have sprung up. And the more you try to oppress the people, the more they will rise. And it's very important to note that the youths are not asleep, they're awake, they're watching. They have alternate forms of media that they are tuning into, and they're aware of the truth out there. And they are collectively forming organizations, they're collectively rising. And, that does give some sort of comfort that it is not going unnoticed.
Can I ask how they're holding up at the moment?
Obviously, with Fatima Zainab, she does have her ups and downs with the non-association order, especially with the restrictions on the visits, the restrictions on the activities that they're allowed to participate in. It's all very distressing, of course. There are moments when she's quite low, and then there are moments when she's okay. But at the end of the day, she does know that what she has done, she stood on the right side of history. She has shown that she's not going to be complicit in the present day genocide going on, and that's important, and that's what allows her to sleep in peace.
How about with your daughter Zoe, Claire?
Yeah, similar. Her mental health was hugely impacted those first 2 months because they put her in the induction wing to keep her away from the others. People were just passing through. She was unable to make friends, and Zoe is autistic, and she finds social interactions very difficult as it is. And this was the worst way to punish her, and she just shut herself in her cell even when it was unlocked. So that's been really hard. But same as Fatima, she's really upheld by knowing that she did the right thing. She started writing poetry, and she wrote a poem about why she did it, which has really inspired a lot of people, I think, on social media.
We'd love to hear the poem.
It's called Prison. Thank you. It's called Prison Conversations. When they ask why I did it, I tell them about the children, how their childhood is stolen from them, how their skeletons are left charred and smoking, how easily their bodies are crushed by falling buildings, how their skin melts as their flaming tents collapse around them. I tell them of the boy found carrying his brother's body inside his bloody backpack. I tell them of the girl whose hanging corpse ended at the knees. I tell them of the father holding up his headless toddler. I tell them of the mother who received the approximate weight of her family in body parts to bury as they had all been shattered beyond recognition. Then I tell them about the history, how this has happened time and time again. I tell them about the Stern Gang, the Hilltop Youth, the wars of 48 and 67, Operation Cast Lead and Protective Edge. I explain how they call it mowing the lawn, cleaning the land of these human animals, how they calculate the minimum nutrients to keep everyone alive, chop a bit off and let only that inside. How since the war they've banned chlorine, morphine and children's toys and much more that's needed for people to survive. Finally, I talk about how it was us that started it, with our Balfour Declaration and media suppression. And I say I cannot stand for this. It can go on no longer. So I took action against Elbit, their weapons supplier. But I never forget to say that it was love, not hate, that called me, watching their songs and dances for freedom, reading their hope-filled books, listening to their dreams of being doctors, teachers, journalists, and never giving up.
It's a wonderful poem. Really, really incredible poem. I felt the chills, and I'm sure everyone who heard that did as well. You should be incredibly proud of what your children have done. They've taken a stand against genocide, and what more important stand could there possibly be? And history will be extremely kind to them, and as damning as those who facilitated one of the worst atrocities of our age. And there is this proud history throughout history, as I say, throughout history, not just here, but all histories, of those who at great cost and sacrifice fought incredible evils and were persecuted at the time, incarcerated and worse. But we know how history remembers them, and we know how history remembers those who prosecuted them. And we all know how this one ends. We all know that this will be remembered as one of the worst crimes of our age. And those, you know, we all have to make a decision. What do we do at a time like this? Do we stay silent? Do we render ourselves complicit? Or do we do something? And they have done more than that. So in the best history and traditions, you should be so proud. So thank you so much to both of you. Honestly, it's been such an honor. And again, just as a sign off, do share this video, leave your comments because that's good for engagement, and then therefore more people will watch the video. Do share it, as I say, but please sign the petition. The petition is in the description on YouTube and also when I tweet it out as well. So make sure you do share that, and make sure this wasn't, and it won't be all in vain, but make sure this actually makes as big an impact as it deserves. So thank you so much to both of you.